Nigerians have been preparing for the forthcoming elections, well aware of the importance of securing the lives and property of both individuals and government against the backdrop of how violence had affected similar past exercises in the recent past. This onerous responsibility is constitutionally that of the police to carry out. But how adequate have these arrangements been, and what more should be done to make this one an improvement? We are now being joined by Tanwa Ashiru, security risk consultant and former U.S. Air Force officer. Good morning, Tanwa. Good to have you join us this Sunday morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. Well, let's go straight into it. You know that this is a special period for Nigeria. It is less than 3 weeks to the presidential elections, and anxieties are heightened. How will you assess the situation in Nigeria currently vis-a-vis insecurity, and then the preparedness of security operatives going into a major election like we're about to face on the 25th of this month and on the 11th of March? What would be your candid assessment?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you this. A lot of security practitioners and professionals are actually very concerned about the current trajectory that the country is going towards. Nigerians are a very tolerant people. We actually tolerate a lot of things that otherwise would have sent other countries just spiraling out of control. However, I think when it comes to messing with people's money, that's kind of where they draw the line. And so what we're seeing right now is increases in fuel shortages. We're seeing scarcity of cash. People are very hungry. People are angry. And it's not because they're not wanting to adopt this cashless policy. It's pretty much because the infrastructure as it is, this cashless banking infrastructure, cannot actually handle the level of transactions in the Nigerian population and what we do. So because of that, there's a lot of tension in the atmosphere. There's loads of queues that are going on. And, all of this is taking place in the heat. Now, let me even give you a bit of an example here. So, you have people who are saying, look, we don't mind adopting this cashless policy, but the challenge is that we're not actually able to do things that we need to do. So, for example, I went into a store, I found the item I was looking for in less than 10 seconds, and then it took me 30 minutes to actually make the payment for that item. What we're going to end up seeing is over the next couple of days, if this is not reversed, a lot of Nigerian businesses are going to suffer with sales. Also, you have their staff that are not able to make it to work because they can't make their payments for their transport fare. You also have staff who are spending productive time standing in queues for petrol, queues for cash and ATMs, queues for their PVCs. And so all of this cumulatively, it really is a boiling pot. And already we've seen in Edo State, in Oyo State, and even in Kano, where the youth there are getting angry, getting frustrated. They're picking up sticks, stones, rocks. They're throwing things at people, destroying buildings and attacking personnel. And we are really worried that if this continues, if the government does not try to ease off a little bit on this policy, we might be talking about, descending into total chaos. And at that point, discussions of elections will even be just a secondary topic. And so right now, the polity is very heated, the atmosphere is very charged, and we need to be very careful going forward.
All right. Let's talk more on security. Now, the use of sophisticated arms and light weapons, like Steve alluded in his introduction, by thugs working for politicians has increased exponentially. Now, last week, a group of thugs were seen shooting sporadically in broad daylight with sophisticated weapons, some with AK-47s. Given the fact that it is illegal to, possess these weapons in Nigeria, you begin to wonder how easy it is for these thugs to have access to these weapons. Now, can you help us, or what is it that the government, or what measures should the government adopt to eradicate this type of menace at this point?
Yeah, I think the painful thing is the fact that, after all these years, we're still talking about the same things over and over again. So border security has been a hot topic for many years. I remember over 10 years ago, the same discussions were being had. Nigeria has, over 3,000 illegal border crossings across its borders, and yet nothing significant has been done to stop that. Now, just so we understand, there are actually three different ways we get these illicit weapons that are floating around the country. First, obviously, is being trafficked into the country from the northern borders. You have the ones that are being manufactured locally and illegally. I say illegally because the government doesn't have its seal of approval on it, but yet it's still being done. And then you have those that are being smuggled into the country through the southern maritime borders as well. So these are different ways by which the weapons are coming in. Not much has been done to actually curb them. Every 4 years, we see this cycle repeat itself over and over again. These young thugs are armed with these weapons. They go out there, they start shooting. Now, what concerns us is how is the law enforcement, the government security forces, are they well poised to be able to respond to this? I can tell you this for sure. So far with what we've seen, even with just little protests where people are coming with sticks and stones, we have not seen necessarily the government security forces show up to respond to that, in a quick and timely manner. In the same token, when you now bring guys that are coming with, semi-automatic weapons, we're obviously not seeing our government security forces even being in the vicinity or being in the area. So we still have, after all these years, after the trillions and trillions of naira that has been spent in defense budget, we are still seeing cases of people, still of the military still not being able, or not military only, but government security forces, which is the police, the NSCDC, are being able to physically show up and actually sort out the situation, show up and respond on time. This is the reason why criminals feel bold enough to attack train stations and they shoot in the air on their way there, knowing fully well they're announcing their arrival and nobody is going to stop them on their way. So if anything, over this last 8 years, over the last 10 years even to be precise, not much has been done really to significantly respond, I think, to situations. Now, the response capabilities vary depending on the states that you're in. So some states have been able to beef up that ability. I know states like Lagos, for example, but even then, it's not commensurate with the widespread, I think, criminality that takes place and the population here. But at least they've been able to put something in place to be able to respond when these things happen. But then you have a lot of other states that simply have not. Ungoverned spaces still exist. You don't even have surveillance towers or anything. You don't have any surveillance mechanism. So it really is a challenge right now that we're dealing with.
Okay, there are three groups involved in all these. There's the government and the security operatives. There are the people, and of course there is the INEC, the electoral umpire. The situation of INEC is so dire because without proper security, it simply means that the elections might not hold or might be postponed, or might not be free and fair. We have seen cases in many parts of the country, in Ogun State, and then in many parts of the southeast of Nigeria, where INEC, facilities have been targeted. For the three groups mentioned, we know that there is little that the people, the public can do. But for the government and the security operatives, and then INEC on the other hand, what would be your specific suggestions as to what ought to be done if we really want to have a free and fair and credible elections that insecurity will not mar?
Okay, so first, again, we're all very concerned about elections, holding or not holding. I know one of the things that would make INEC actually postpone or put a hold on the elections would be insecurity. Already, I think about 686 different communities across Nigeria have already been flagged as high-risk locations and communities where even INEC said we don't know if we're going to be effectively able to distribute materials in these areas. And so that's one concern that is already out there. And then logistics, even INEC has said the logistics is a challenge, especially with the fuel scarcity. they don't rely on, INEC doesn't have 100% control over the logistics and the movement of their materials. They have to rely on some of these road transport unions to assist them, and private transportation to assist in getting all of these materials to all the different polling units. So if we already know that that's a challenge and that's a concern, there's so many reasons why we should, maybe be a bit worried as to if INEC will still go forward with the elections. I hope they do. I sincerely hope they do. Because you have a subsection of the population that's saying, you know what? We are going to keep our calm about all of these scarcities and shortages that are going on. We are going to try to do the right thing and make our votes and our voices heard at the polls. So they're calm about it. But if you then come, and I think a vast majority of Nigerians are just waiting for this thing to be over and done with, so they can vote and life can carry on because we're tired of the politicking. If INEC then comes and says they're postponing it again, we're not certain that people will take that well, and that could be seen with, a lot of tensions might show up afterwards. Now, when it comes to election security in particular, already over 100 INEC offices have actually been attacked, or INEC offices, properties. INEC in itself has been physically attacked, at least over 100 of them since the 2019 elections. So is it that we're not actually able to really protect even INEC as it is? Well, aside from that, one of the things I know we can do is that ahead of time, security agencies must identify the hotspot areas, places where we know are probably going to be high risk with election violence during the elections. What are these places? Places where you have a big thug population, for example. There are a lot of thugs that are operating there. How about you send additional reinforcement, additional men in that area? I read also that the police is not planning on using some of the local vigilantes and some of the state security infrastructure. I think they might want to sort of reconsider that. If anything, at least use them as part of your intelligence network to get early warning about any impending attacks. When you see a group of thugs that are coming, you should be getting a call ahead of time so that the police can be ready, or whoever has been stationed in that polling unit can be ready to defend that. You also have locations where, sometimes the opposition, and I'll be very frank here and be very clear. I remember seeing this in the 2019 elections. There were certain parts of Lagos State, for example, that are high opposition parties. So there, in the case of Lagos, there were mostly PDP locations, or the people there favored PDP. And I remember when they were all lining up to vote, and it was captured all on camera, uploaded on social media. And you could see the thugs showed up, came and scattered the whole thing, threw the ballots away and everything, simply because they knew most of the people in that area, in that polling unit, were not planning on voting for the APC at the time. So we already know that there are going to be some of these locations ahead of time. Maybe this would be a good time to ensure that there's adequate reinforcement. Now, finally, one of the areas we're also very concerned about is after the announcements. What happens when INEC announces who the next president is, or INEC announces that, look, you know what, it's inconclusive and we can't tell you who the president is? How are Nigerians going to react? Now, I know that as security risk professionals, this is one of the key areas that we're looking at. How are Nigerians going to react? And we're trying to plan for that. And I know security agencies should also, or are also going to be looking at the same thing, trying to go to those areas where if LP wins, these are the areas that are going to be upset about it, and they might start causing a bit of chaos and insecurity. These are areas where if APC wins, this is where the people will be upset. So just trying to map this out ahead of time and making sure that you are deploying the right amount of people to those areas to ensure that that this violence can be curtailed. I know also that the Nigerian police has been very, very key in telling and teaching and retraining their members on the proper conduct of policing during elections. What that means is that it's not always a good idea to show up with live bullets, for example, to some of these locations, because you show up with live bullets, you're probably going to use it, and then there are going to be actual fatalities. So being able to show up with, rubber bullets or other things that will also serve as deterrents, but then at the same time won't cause immediate fatalities. So there's a lot that I know needs to be done. I know there's a lot that has already been done by our government security forces, but they definitely should be bracing up, because things are going to definitely get very heated as the elections proceed.
All right. I'd like for you to compare your impression about election security management in Nigeria as to your time in the United States. And also, what, in your opinion, are the realistic choices before the government regarding economic deprivation of citizens as a national security matter?
I mean, so, one of the things is social media, and I think cyber has brought in a whole different angle and dimension into elections that weren't really there back in the day. So, for example, I know, we have issues of misinformation and disinformation. For example, when we look at even the U.S. elections, there was a lot of interference from cyber attackers. And also, you had cases where, there would be all this disinformation on social media that would pit party members or a group against the other one. And literally all of this was being orchestrated by actors, whether they're state or non-state actors, but by cyber actors. Now, what that meant is, for example, they will put up a flyer that says, we are going to show up as, XYZ party, we must show up and show our displeasure to these people. And then they will put up another flyer to ABC party and say, ABC party, you also have to show up at this grounds because these guys are planning to protest and we must counter it. And so next thing you know, both of these people, very, very intense, very passionate, would show up and start screaming at each other, yelling at each other. And all the while, all of it was orchestrated by some individuals in a country thousands of miles away, orchestrating all this division and chaos and unrest on the ground. So that is a new dimension, I think, that we've seen in the last couple of years. Now, bringing that even here to Nigeria, trust me, the threat of cyber is also very, very high here. I know in the recently conducted Kenya elections, Kenya said there were over 200 attempted attacks on their voting portal to try to change the results. Over 200 within 24 hours after the elections. And even in the recently concluded elections here in Nigeria in September, INEC had also said that they had multiple attacks on their platform as well, their report viewing platform, and a lot of them had originated from Asia. So today, the way elections are, it's not just a local thing. Now you have so many actors who are involved, whether they're state-sponsored or non-state sponsored, and that's kind of a different thing. Now, in terms of population management, I think it's also very, very key that, for example, with this cash policy that's being put out there, one of the complaints that people have, for example, is, listen, I need to take a bus from point A to point Z. And the bus driver does not have a POS. And, I don't even use a smartphone. I tried star 737, it's not working. And if you really sit down and think about it, you realize that the onboarding for cashless should have been done with this segment of the society a long time ago. Why haven't the transportation providers, why haven't they been fully onboarded in just going cashless? And I really believe that if this had been done, if we had been strategic about this, we won't be in the situation that we are right now. I say that simply just to explain that you have demographics of the population that we don't think are important enough for them to be onboarded to the future. And this is simply not right. And then it also makes it seem like a lot of these decisions were just, passing decisions that were not really well thought out and whatnot. And it simply just continues to add fuel to the narratives that are out there that, there are groups and there are cabals that are trying to make this election not happen. And so, I think communication is going to be very key for the government going forward. I think another thing too, first of all, they need to be very honest and, communicate as much as possible. The second thing too is the president actually needs to, I don't know if he's being told the exact truth of what's going on. I know Ashiru has a way of just sort of keeping you immune to the real pulse of the people out there. I know if he wanted cash, I know a lot of politicians today will get access to this cash that the average Nigerians don't have. And so if anything, it makes it worse. On that day, when they show up with cash, I can tell you so many more people would be willing to sell their votes for that cash because now it's such a hot commodity. I think the president really needs to be letting on the truth. And he himself needs to try to seek the truth. And what that means is if he's not trying to just hear the red team, hear the other side of the story, speak to those people who are completely against you and just find out what is it that you say about me? What is it that is the true situation? If he doesn't do that, I fear that history will be extremely unkind to him. So that's just also a little advice, I think, for the president. Get the truth. Really know what's going on the ground, because I'm not sure you're being fed the full picture of the situation.
Well, I mean, that's an important thing to say, given the fact that the president says in 5 days' time, he will try to come up with a decision on what can be done on this whole issue of the redesign of the Naira and the scarcity of cash. But of course, we know that there is a huge sabotage going on here and there. But that's not my point. Where I'm going is, what will be your... let me put it this way. Do you think that the huge amounts of money in 7.5 years, almost 8 years of this administration, the huge amount of budgetary allocation, extra budgetary allocation, specifically voted into the issue of security, is justified? I mean, even in the president's home state, just 2 days ago, 41 people, 41, not 14, 41 people were killed, you know, when a terrorist ambushed vigilante groups, etc. Almost every part of Nigeria has a gory tale in terms of not economic issues now, but in terms of insecurity and terrorists, bandits, kidnappers, you know, having a lot more confidence in attacking people, killing people, maiming people. Do you think that what we have invested so far will be justified? And secondly, if you can add that to it, your experience in the United States will count. How do you address the call, muted in some areas, but there nevertheless, that maybe it might, you know, be a lot better if people are allowed to bear arms in Nigeria? If terrorists, bandits, armed robbers know that 7 or 8 out of the 10 people that they are planning to attack are also armed, maybe that will change the narrative. You have an experience in the United States. Do you think that that can be a consideration at some point in Nigeria?
Yeah, so I don't think we've been very strategic in terms of how the allocated monies are being spent. And I think, you know, we have to also look at it as a basket. At some point, we have to just agree that the situation is a basket situation. You're pouring water into the basket and it's leaking, okay? It's not sensible. So you're pouring a lot of money into defense spending, into security spending, and it's still a basket case. There's so many causes of leakages and you haven't actually looked into it properly. Also, you know, we're so big on just procuring more things, procuring more assets, procure. What about the existing ones you have? Are they being fixed? Are they even being utilized the way they should? So we're always so big on that. The other thing too is, where are these monies being focused on? You know, we're always so big on, let's get the additional helicopters and additional aircrafts. Okay, so what about the borders? What about the forests? You know, some things require a bit more strategy, I think. And if there's one thing I've learned over the years, especially when I look at what's going on in that space, I just tell myself, you cannot give what you don't have. So if you have not been able to really understand what a proper national security coordination is supposed to look like, how do you coordinate your borders and border security properly with your forest security, with your local troops on the ground? How do you coordinate your intel on the domestic level, the international level? How do you just even fuse all of this together? How do we have collaboration and fusion centers spread across the country? Again, you cannot give what you don't have. So a lot of the monies, you know, they keep pointing into just procuring more assets. I've been involved and being called to I know there was a time where there were a whole bunch of vehicles. I won't specify what sort of vehicles they were, but so there were vehicles that were all damaged and needed to be repaired. But unfortunately, in that period, those who were responsible for repairing were just simply more interested in just procuring more, or seeing how they could put the cost of the repairs for the same cost of purchasing new ones instead. So who are we really fooling here? You know, at the end of the day, you know, the monies are simply not being allocated properly. Now, and that's one thing we need to look at. Let's tackle the corruption in there. Let's seal up the holes. Let's stop using a basket, pouring more water into a basket, thinking that that's what's going to solve the situation. It's not. When it comes to things like kidnapping, there's specific and strategic ways that can be tackled. You need to have ground interdiction forces that are actually well trained to be able to go and conduct rescue operations at any point in time to where the victims are not harmed. But instead, we opt for, you know what, go ahead and pay the ransom. When they're released, then we'll go after them. But again, that's, it's a strategic problem, and that's something that can be addressed when you put the right, the round pegs in round holes. So when you put the qualified people in the right spaces, I guarantee you they will come up with solutions that you never even thought about. We can't keep recycling the same, I don't want to say the same people over and over again thinking you're going to get different results. You're not. Now, when it comes to weapons and individual carrying and allowing people to bear arms, it's a very tricky situation. See, you saw the videos. I know a lot of us saw the videos of the protests going on in Ibadan.
Yes.
Because of fuel scarcity, because of the banks. Imagine if they had weapons. Imagine what that would have looked like. Okay, Nigerians will be very quick to pull that trigger. And even in America right now, they're reeling from the effects of allowing this, Second Amendment and still allowing people to bear arms. They're reeling from it because now people with mental health issues are going about killing innocent people. Just even in the month of January alone, before the month was even over, they had already recorded over 35 mass shootings that had taken place. Their children in their schools have to do drills for active shooters. That means think about it. Your 3-year-old, your 4-year-old, your 5-year-old has to learn that, look, there's a guy with a gun coming to kill you in the school. You need to know you need to run under the table and keep quiet. At 5 years old, at least, it's so they're reeling from that, and I don't think that it's going to take more guns to stop the guns. I think, especially in a country like Nigeria, dialogue has always gone a long way. They always say that when you see something, when you see unrest, when you see chaos, there's someone behind it. And believe it or not, these people are always willing to come and sit down and talk. Even these bandits. I know on one hand, they need to be taken out because you're breaking the law, you're taking lives, and you need to be punished as such. But on the other hand as well, you need to have on the back end some people who are trying to get to the table with those who are directly involved in orchestrating these things, having back table talks to actually put a stop to the nonsense. So I think, we really need to also focus on non-kinetic means, which is non-violent means of tackling the insecurity situation. Now, the other category of people that I think should be okay for them to bear arms to also help is maybe even security companies, private security companies, and it won't just be just anyone. They can work out the details of how this can work. Bottom line is if you want it to work, it can work. But you also have a lot of ex-servicemen, for example, who are now transitioned into the private sector. They used weapons when they served active duty in the military or when they served in the DSS. Now they're in the private sector and you say, oh, well, you're not allowed to carry arms anymore. Maybe, but if they've been qualified and they're still skilled and they should still maybe be able to do this, and we can have something in place that gives them the ability to do that so that these private sector guys are the ones providing protection for private individuals so that the police can actually do the policing work and provide protection for the general public and for the society. So there's a lot of changes that need to be made, a lot of hard decisions, and we keep recycling old people, and we don't know if they're going to, change the mindset and really help us evolve and move into the space that we need to be operating in right now. So there's a solution, I think, to all of these problems, and hopefully we'll get it right this time around.
All right. Tanwa Ashiru, security expert, we'd like to thank you for joining us on the Morning Show today. Thanks for bringing insight into the topic. Thank you.